Welcome to another Meet the Speakers episode in our series for Illuminate and Elevate in September in London, September 2026, Friday the 11th. The details will be in the notes attached to this video or the articles or however this is going to be shared. There will be links to find out more details and to buy tickets. At the moment, there are still tickets for sale. So my guest for this conversation is Dave Mannall, and I'll let him tell us all who he is, his background, how you got to where you are. So welcome, Dave, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Dawn. And thank you for listening in. My name is Dave, and I'm also known as Trinity 4 on YouTube. Trinity was a nickname given to me during my national service in the 80s. That's a long story, but I was just like a regular go-along guy. You know, I knew things like the JFK shooting were not, there wasn't clarity on that subject, but I kind of went along and muddled along with life like most other people. Ended up in London working for Westminster City Council for quite a number of years. So I was kind of inside of the system, but I was never like bought into the system. I was always sort of a bit of an outsider, couldn't see the career progression. Perhaps I wasn't seen as a safe pair of hands, which was a term I heard used a few times as I got sort of up into management. Um, and interestingly, because your medical background, Dawn, the last report I ever wrote was commissioned by the Department of Health, and it was considered by the Department of Health to be an excellent example of what good reporting should look like. But this came at about the same time as my mother passing of motor neuron disease, and in the 7 months from her diagnosis to her passing, I discovered a lot of things about the insurance industry and the medical industry that I'd never paid much attention to. My mother had been a career nurse, and her care by the medical industry fell way short of what I expected. And with her being in South Africa and me being in London, I was ferrying between London and South Africa during those months to try and help see if we could find ways to fix, heal, cure, but there was nothing for her, and it was a pretty pretty awful passing. That pain caused me to look back at my own pain from the Angolan War in 1987, and I wrote a book about that called Battle on the Lomba in 1987. And in so doing, I discovered things about the battles that I was involved in that spoke to some deeper conspiracies that I'd never considered or never seemed possible. And it sent me on a number of rabbit holes, which led to 9/11, discovering that what I'd been told by the BBC wasn't true. Jane Stanley comes to mind. And then, I had a brush with ayahuasca in 2015, DMT. And in that, I went from I went from a seven. I went from like a an atheist or agnostic at best to someone who knows that we are divinely created, or we are the expression of the divine. And for me, throughout my life, I was always curious as to what is the reason for life? What is the purpose of life? And this gateway through that experience that I had in 2015 really ripped the veil off this material avatar real or existence that we seem to have presented to us. And it sent me on a sort of series of research articles and bodies of work that have edified my understanding of the reason that we're here, the purpose, the meaning of life. And so my talk this year is on the electromagnetic universe and how we are intrinsically connected to all that is. And we are our physical, whatever we call this avatar, and whatever we're carrying, the soul or the spirit that we're carrying, has been given or has offered itself a divine mission. And that mission, it seems, has been usurped for nefarious reasons or by intention, such that it's not an easy journey, that it's not a quick fix, that it's not for this sort of I'll lie on the sofa and just expect everything to come to me. We have to become the creator. We have to become the driver of the change from within, such that the world outside of us may change, or if it doesn't change, it's not as important as ensuring that what happens within is the maturation, is what they talk about in science. Evolution from monkey to man is complete nonsense. The evolution is one of the soul.
Exactly.
The soul is here to grow in this lifetime, and perhaps in lifetimes past and lifetimes to come. But from everything that I've researched, and it comes back to, in the Nikola Tesla research and the Eileen McCusack, like biofield tuning, and all of these kinds of things are all connected to the electromagnetic signature of ourselves and the world around us. We know a very easy one is that a very bright colored wall might be hard on the senses, or a screeching sound, or the nails down the chalkboard. These things we know are dissonant, and they can make us feel unwell. And the opposite is also true, that the right frequencies, the right colors, the right music sounds, these things are going to be healing for us. So understanding I think that for me, because I've done a lot of street activism over the years since 2018.
Yes, I was going to mention that because that's something you've done an awful lot of. So you have interacted with a lot of people publicly, to actually talk to people. I mean, I know we have various different backgrounds and different roles, and let's say one of yours has been literally going out onto the street and talking to people, and directly. So yeah, that's an important role to help bring in or share information and help bring in people who may not have access to that information kind of on the screen. So as we're going to say, with meeting people in person is really good. So anyway, I didn't want to sort of cut across, but I'm glad you mentioned that street activism because it's important.
Yeah, evil prospers. I'll say it again, evil prospers when good men do nothing, or good women do nothing. And for me, when I discovered, the 9/11 information, and I could sort of parcel that off as, oh, in the American system, there are untruths. We know about the JFK and so on, but there are untruths, but it's easy to leave it there in this pool. But once I discovered that the whole idea of materialism, like Madonna said, we're living in a material world, that's a lie. That was part of the kind of indoctrination, I'm sure. But once I discovered that, I realized that the scope of the deception against mankind is total. There isn't an element of our world that hasn't been curated by the forces that are seeking to destabilize us, or misdirect us, or mislead us, or test us, perhaps. So once I discovered that, I felt compelled for the first time in my life to become active in saying something. I could leave the other things. 9/11, I was in chat rooms and so on and trying to inform people what I knew. But once I came to this idea that this isn't a material world, that everything is designed or set to be designed against us, even though we may well be the purpose and the creator of this. I felt compelled to go out and speak. But in the online forum, by the time I was ready to talk about this in 2016 and 17, I wasn't getting a lot of traction outside of the echo chambers that have been created by Facebook and YouTube and so on. And I saw a man up in Scotland. He called himself John Smith Globli, Harry MacDonald, and he was doing amazing work, doing street activism, going out with the camera and asking people questions. And so an opportunity came up 7 years ago to meet with him and a few others in Hyde Park. And I went down to Hyde Park, and by the end of the afternoon, these old timers who'd been doing it before me came up and were like, "Damn, you're really good at this, you know." And so I built a kind of support base and a bit of a following by doing that, and it felt good to be breaking through the algorithms, going out into the public square, giving people information, handing out flyers. We've normally got banners and that kind of thing going. And then with me sort of throwing all of my suit and tie life away, I had to move into other things like gardening and woodworking and so on in order to keep the bills paid. And that lasted for a while, but by 2019, I was sort of on, back to the wall. I wasn't going to go to the government for any kind of handout or housing or any benefits of any sort. So it forced me and my family to sort of go on the road, to be without a home. And so it has been for 7 years. Come October, it'll be 7 years. By the time almost when we meet, it'll be 7 years that I've not had my own home. And so we have been on an adventure that has taken us all around the place. We did a tour around Europe, actually, in a camper van, and with the banners and going around and telling people all of this kind of stuff and so on. That's all happened since 2019. And then, of course, the lockdowns gave us opportunity to look at other information that perhaps, in the medical field that perhaps I hadn't focused on before. And I've learned an awful lot about, how we care for ourselves, our physical bodies outside of the paradigm that was laid down by Rockefeller type education. So yeah, I've been an activist, and I got in the flat Earth community. I became quite well known because of that, and so it has afforded me a platform to continue talking. And over the last few years, I've been invited to talk in conference halls and tents and other places where people have already taken a lot of the steps towards realizing what is going on. Because once in the street, I'll occasionally meet someone who's really chuffed to learn, this information. But oftentimes, bursting the bubble can cause a very powerful reaction. And I have encountered more of that. And I'm aware, in fact, I sometimes say, that guy who's so angry right now, he's going to go down to the pub tonight and tell everybody in the pub about this ridiculous set of ideas that he heard from this guy in the street, which is fine by me, because you see, I think people suffer from dearth or a shortage of information in the world today, And so for those people whose hearts and minds are beginning to open, just like with me, it's like my willingness to look at stuff that I would never have previously considered came only because of the trauma of watching my mother suffer and going through all of that stuff, writing the book, discovering that some of the battles that I was involved in had been choreographed ahead of time. They were real. Some people say these wars aren't real. I think most wars are real, but there is a degree of choreography on to get both sides into a particular place at a particular time, such that there can be an event that costs lives and material, which the taxpayers will pick up. and will justify further action. So I was motivated to go out and do this talking, and I have found that in so doing, it has also helped me to um, really try and understand better why, because one of the biggest questions I get in the street activism is why? Why would they lie? Why would they go to all this trouble to, in the case of the globe, fake all of that, fake all of these wars, fake all of these pandemics, fake all of these things? Why would they go to all of that trouble? Well, one could say that it's simply about money and control. But I go further and say that it's about you, that you are the center of the universe, and your journey here is paramount. And that is why they never want us to understand who we are, why we're here, and what the purpose of this existence is. They would rather have us believing we're material girls in a material world, rather than the
Oh, I
expression of
agree.
the divine, rather than the
Mm,
expression of the divine. And with that comes a certain, well, it's a certain freedom,
mm,
knowing who we are, that we are these eternal entities expressing ourselves in this very short form material experience, really helps one to clarify, um, the sort of inner journey, and also to offset some of um, the travails and troubles that come to any life. Every one of us is going to experience troubles and travails in our journey here, and how we see them, those troubles, will determine how we um, act them out, or act out in this life, and how we use it for growth rather than self-immolation or self-destruction. Yeah.
mm.
When I took the DMT in 2015, dimethyltryptamine, um, I said three things important when I could speak. It took 7 minutes, the process. When I could speak, the first words I said were, "It's true, there's a God." The second thing I said is that every 16-year-old should be offered this, because if so, we would never go to war with each other. And the third thing I said, and I was, I think, about 45 at the time, I said, up until this moment in my life, I've learned absolutely nothing. I have to begin all over again to realize, to discover the truth about who we are, who I am, and what's going on here. And that's 10 or 11 years ago now. And I dedicated myself entirely. My TV went off, never watched the TV since then. Um, and all I've done in that time pretty much is to seek answers to these questions. And I would say that I'm not a slow learner, and I think that by 2017 I was very comfortable with the things that I discovered in that journey. And then once 2018 kicked off and the activism started, I sort of, in a way, put myself back on the front line, like being at war, because people will know that, friends and family who normally think you're of reasonable or high intelligence, once you start telling these things that are so uncomfortable to hear, they start to think that you've lost your mind. When
Mm.
you're out in the street and the public who don't know you, they will abuse you. I've had police coming to me in the street asking me questions, and even while the police are standing there, people are walking past me saying, "You moron." Like, um, because this stuff is so hard for people to, and that, by the way, everything is a vibration in this electromagnetic world. And so when I pour,
Mm.
like Dr. Emoto did, and others have done, is when I pour good or negative energy into something, I can affect its structure. And I think that to be in combat all of the time, is going to have a negative effect, Um, if I found myself at a point in Facebook arguments with people over these subjects, and I'm carrying that vibration, that frequency in me, and I know that that's actually detrimental to me. So the year,
Yes.
sorry.
No, I was just going to say yes. And sometimes, the situations we find ourselves in and the interactions we have with people, in some ways it's about them, but it's also about how we respond, and it's for us to choose how to respond. And it's not to accept what other people say, but it's in a way to find to learn how to not necessarily take it on personally. So when people call you names,
Yeah.
it's how you interpret that, how you interact with them as a result of that, what you do. So again, it's all about our energy, where we put our attention. I mean, there's so much of all of that, and that's obviously key for your work. It's key for the work I'm doing as well, and that's why it's so important, as we were saying before, about being in person. So we get to sense other people's energies. But in a place, in like a conference like Illuminate and Elevate, where there will be like-minded people, there's there's less likely to be any antagonism, so we can relax a little more and open up, and then it's easier. Whereas I'm sure it must have been quite difficult to hold your space speaking to people who are obviously, let's just say, not either not interested or even antagonistic. I mean, that must be difficult. And
Particularly
again,
when it's,
part of our journeys. These are all,
yeah,
parts of our journey. So,
yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, it's fascinating, and yeah, I mean, you've given us an amazing insight into your journey and where you've been so far, and we really appreciate that. So. Yes, and really what you're going to share, and how, like you said, my background isn't medical as such. It's looking into the medical system, so it's from the outside, kind of looking in, and like you say, it's all about chemicals, where we are much more electromagnetic than chemical. I mean, kind of chemical even. I mean, that's questionable. So it is a big shift away from how we approach who we are, and also our health, what that means, and what we can do about it. And as you say, it's all, once we learn, it can be quite a quite difficult to take on, and at the same time it is empowering once you kind of settle with it, that it's all so different from what we've been taught, and it's empowering. You think, oh, I can do things, I can take responsibility.
Mm.
That's the exciting part for me anyway. So that's how I feel, and I know it can be, as I say, there's an unsettling part in the early stages of that journey. It can be unsettling. So
Call it,
yeah.
some people call it the armor of God. Now, I mean, I only use the term, the name God, because people understand what that means.
Mm,
Um, I'm not coming at it from the way that the religions come at it, but we have to work on our inner onion, our inner strength, because we understand that, if the core of the apple is rotten, then it's going to affect the whole. Whilst the outside of the apple can take a little bit of damage, if the core is rotten, it's over. And we I think that one of the things that we're aware of in our society today is that a lot of people are drawn into observing, watching celebrity, for example. And they can spend their time staring at the outside and focusing on, the soap opera of the news, of the TV, whatever, or of that celebrity's life. But they're missing the point, which is that it's actually, the journey is to know thyself, not to
yes.
know thy favorite celebrity.
Yes.
And the same applies to this journey of going into the dark. because you know the the things that are happening in this world are in some cases deeply dark, and I believe that they are representative of the lower essence of man. And we need, as part of our cleansing, as part of our healing, we need to look at that. But people in my truth community, um, including myself, are often we're staring at the dark almost like someone staring at their favorite celebrity. We're spending so much time invested in how dark, what else can I find that's dark, that we are not attending to our own inner dark or our own inner balance. And I think that the harmony, and I'll talk more about this at Illuminate in September. But the harmony comes from balancing both the goat and the sheep. I use the analogy of the goat and the sheep because it's I mean, I know it's a bit biblical, but I believe that the good shepherd understands how to tend to his sheep and to his goat. Goats are very different creatures to sheep. Now, the sheep, in my way of talking about it, is representative of the mind, and the goat is representative of the lower chakras, the red dark chakras at the root. The goat is rambunctious and will run around and do all kinds of crazy things. And the sheep, on the other hand, is far more like willing to go along into the light, follow a religion, all new agey or whatever. And I say to people that I think that the chakra system is very interesting because you've got these blue sky, purples, and so on up here, which is what we'd see in the earth as well, in the macrocosm. And then we've got the magma, and we've got the lower energies in the root. And then the chakra that is green is the heart. And heart is an anagram for earth.
Yes.
And so I believe that the balance, the Goldilocks zone is actually the green, is the heart, is the earth. That's the balance point. So we will have periods where we're in the sine wave going kind of like this, but being able to kind of go into the dark and then be able to bring it back to resting in the heart is that kind of practice of self-management.
Yeah,
Self
so
control.
it's recognizing where you are in the dark, and as you say, bringing yourself back, not staying in the dark, and also not necessarily having to stay or thinking it's a correct to say stay in, if you like, the light. As you say, it's always a movement, and it's around the harmonious center, and not being too extreme, because that takes away energy. Yes, it's going to be very interesting. Thank you. Oh, I mean, yes, what you'll be talking about, very interesting. I mean, there's so much to it all.
Lots to
So
unpack. But
yes,
it'll be
lots to.
nicer to Illuminate to be able to kind of, because one of the things I think that matters most to me now is um, community,
Yes.
and I realize, as much as when I started all of this journey, I mean, in 2015, 16, I was like, wow, in 6 months' time, the whole world, this is so obvious, the whole world will know. And now, having spent 7 years in the street talking to people, I have to say, with love, that the majority are going to be swept away by the misleading. Then we saw that in COVID. The majority are going to be swept away. And I didn't write that script, but I'm willing to accept that that's really what's going on here, is that there's like a pyramid system. It's like a football team, if you like. Only one person needs to score the goal for the whole stadium to go, yeah, we all won, yeah. Well, it only takes one person to do that. And some teachers say, 1 in 1,000 or whatever will be that number. So I recognize that we are getting to a time, Dawn, where those people who who are moving through this, who have been given that gift or have taken that gift of insight, are not in the majority. And therefore, when we come together, and we've had a few encounters, and where I met you in Spain last year, we've had a few encounters where coming together in this kind of way is so enriching, so
Indeed.
empowering, so rewarding, and it helps to build, because we are so few, it helps to build a community
Yes,
despite the fracturing and the distance sometimes that physically is between us. So I think that's why I'm excited about, Illuminate and Elevate. I think it's one of those fantastic opportunities for people to get together, make friends, hear some great speakers, some great ideas. And if I can toot my horn, I think that, understanding the reason or the meaning for life or the purpose
mm,
of life, whilst I'm coming at it from my theoretical ideas, because none of us has ever gone to the other side and come back. But I've seen so much information, I've done so much insight work on this, that I think that I'd like to believe that people will come away from my presentation with a much clearer and tangible sense of their
mm.
connection to the entire macroverse, and
That
and and the,
sounds
and the reason why we're here is I believe is this work, if you choose, because we all have free will.
We do. That sounds wonderful. Really looking forward to that. So, if anyone who's watching and listening hasn't bought the ticket yet, as I say, links will be in the notes below. And there are still, as we're recording this, there are still some tickets at the early bird price, and so grab them while you can. Doesn't mean to say that there isn't another price scale, but if you want to join us. As I say, grab your tickets sooner rather than later. And we look forward to seeing you. Look forward to seeing you again in September, Dave. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody. And hopefully see you all in September.